Good afternoon, fellow ruminators. Welcome back to another session of Rumination with Andrew. Thank you so much for joining as we are about to discuss a very important topical matter. And today we are going to dive into a story that's stirring tension across Jamaica and Trinidad. With states of emergency declared to combat rising crime, many are now asking, are lockdowns looming next? And when I say lockdowns, I mean that you're going to be locked down as we were during the COVID-19 pandemic. And when we look at curfews, the frequent curfews that are occurring in Trinidad and Tobago and also in Jamaica, those are soft lockdowns. I call these curfews soft lockdowns. So are we heading for a permanent lockdown because of the transnational crime and criminal networks that we're seeing in the region, in Jamaica particularly, and also in Trinidad? And we're also hearing that they're spreading right across the Caribbean region into Barbados, among other Caribbean territories. What if there's more going on behind the scenes, things the governments don't want the public to know? In this video, we'll unpack the real impact of these measures, the potential consequences for civil liberties, and what you need to watch out for in the coming months. Stay tuned and don't forget to like, comment, and share if you want the truth out there. Remember now to also subscribe to the channel so the channel can grow, and you can make your contributions at Andy_Tucker_450 at hotmail.com. Now, the title of this afternoon's video is Lockdowns Loom After States of Emergency: What Jamaica and Trinidad Don't Want You to Know. Very important topic that we need to discuss in light of what is happening at the current moment in Jamaica and also in Trinidad with these states of emergency. But if you look also what is happening in Latin America, particularly in El Salvador, you'll understand that the state of emergencies have become the norm in these countries, in countries like El Salvador. And I think that we are patterning we are modeling what we're seeing in El Salvador. And I have been saying to you, but you have not been listening and you have not been watching my videos on crime. I've published a lot of videos on crime. You don't listen to that. You tend to want to watch the videos in terms of who is going to win. Is Andrew Holness or Mark Golding, as far as the Jamaican politics is concerned, and perhaps Keith Rowley or Kamla Person Caesar in the context of Trinidad and Tobago. We're not looking at events like crime and violence, which is going to take away eventually, or they will allow such criminal networks to take away our crime. Our liberties, not our crime, but our liberties. We wish they could take away our crime, right? Not our crime, but we wish they could eradicate crime completely. Are lockdowns coming next in Trinidad and Tobago and in Jamaica following the recent states of emergency? In this video, we dive into government's tough crime-fighting measures and explore what the future might hold for the nation. Are these states of emergency effective in curbing crime, or are they paving the way for stricter controls like lockdowns? We have to ask ourselves these questions. Now, this morning in the Trinidad Guardian newspaper, we have murder under SOE. Family of murdered man calls for curfew. And they're saying that relatives of Ryan Barrett are calling for a curfew to be implemented after he was murdered sometime between Friday night and early yesterday morning, reportedly for refusing to pay extortion money. Barrett, 35, a cousin of murdered court clerk Andrea Barrett, was shot once in the head. Police said that around 12:48 a.m., Corporal Caruth and other officers responded to a report of a shooting at Church Street, Carapo, where they found Barrett. He was taken to the Arima General Hospital, but was pronounced dead on arrival. Police said that around 12:30 a.m., the truck driver and businessman went outside to move his white Nissan Navara when he was shot. So we're seeing this, and on Friday, it was that Trinidad declared a state of public emergency. Now we have to look at what is happening, and SOE isn't a crime fighting strategy, is it? But we are saying in Jamaica and perhaps in Trinidad that it is. That states of emergencies are now the new norm, the new crime solving tactic, the new solution for solving crimes within the region, which means, therefore, that your civil rights are at stake, are endangered by what our prime ministers are doing. And I did call your attention to Dr. Andrew Holness's speech that was given at the recently held CARICOM meeting in Montego Bay, Jamaica, in which he says that, the Caribbean is about to launch a war, particularly in his native Jamaica, a war on the gangs. And this is going to be a global war. Now, Dr. Andrew Holness also wrote an interesting piece in the Jamaica Gleaner some months ago, and this article was published in the Jamaica Gleaner on February 17th, 2025, and I think it was a Sunday, so he wrote it for the Sunday Gleaner. Andrew Holness, a global war on gangs is imperative. A global war on gangs is imperative. That is the title of Dr. Andrew Holness's article that he penned for the Jamaica Gleaner on February 17th, 2025. Listen to what Dr. Andrew Holness is saying. Armed violence driven by organized crime has long been a crisis in Jamaica, but has been spreading across the wider Caribbean in recent years. For decades, we have suffered one of the highest murder rates in the world, with over 80% of homicides committed using firearms smuggled into the country. Now, we must understand that Dr. Holness did receive his doctorate, PhD, whatever you call it, and he received that in the whole matter of guns trafficking, and that is his expertise, according to what we are told. According to the CARICOM Implementing Agency for Crime and Security, the impacts armed violence in our Caribbean countries or neighbors is rapidly approaching that level. The common denominator is clear. Organized gangs, their transnational networks, and the weapons they illegally bring traffic. These threats transcend national borders. Similarly, our response must be transnational. So he's saying that it's not going to be just in Jamaica that there's going to be a war on the gangs. We see that in Haiti. We're seeing that now in Trinidad, and perhaps Barbados is going to declare their war on the gangs very soon, but that is happening throughout the Caribbean region. We see also that the war on the gangs being waged also in the Dominican Republic, in El Salvador, and many other Latin American countries, I think, including not Uruguay, but Ecuador. So we have to look at what is happening, the trends that are happening globally. Somebody was talking to me the other day and they were saying, do you see any difference, or is there any difference between, well, we were arguing over the fact that there is no difference between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. But that person was arguing and saying that there is, and there would have been a difference if Kamala Harris had become president. And I'm saying no, because all of these policies that we're seeing in Donald Trump's America, and what we're seeing now as spill off into the Caribbean region are US policies, the policies of the US empire. And if you have been following what is happening in Haiti, Haiti is going to be the model of how they are going to deal with the gangs. Now we understand that the gangs are launching a war on the state. Now, is that war being engineered? That's the question that you and I have to ask. Because if we don't ask that question and we think that the gangs are in isolation of government and the private sector, the financial giants and titans that are in these countries, if they are connected to these criminal elements, then we are in trouble. Because what is happening is that they are going to provoke the gangs to launch a war on the state. Then the state will have to respond to that so-called smokescreen war, and then our rights will be eventually eradicated, eroded, suspended. These are some of the insights that we must be delving into at the moment. We can't just sit down and think that what we're hearing on the media and isolate. We're not connecting the dots, that the gangs might not be connected to the government and the government to the private sectors and the financial interests. We have to be able to look and to delve into these matters. But as far as Haiti is concerned, we thought that that was just something that is happening in Haiti. But this is a global trend that we are seeing all across Latin America and in the Caribbean region. And we have now got to pay attention and to be alert as to the patterns. We have to look at patterns. And the same thing we can, when we talk about Mia Motley, when we talk about Andrew Holness, when we talk about Donald Trump, we are looking at patterns and trends that shape these politicians and their agendas. And that is what you have to understand. So when I say that there is no distinct difference, or there is no distinctive difference between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, I am not looking at personalities. Obviously, their personalities are different. And what Trump is going to be able to achieve, perhaps Kamala would not be able to achieve what he achieved, but the agenda is there. The agenda is there. Maybe he can push the agenda that has been set for him much more aggressively than Kamala would have been able to do. But it doesn't mean, therefore, that she was not going to push her luck. She would, because that is the job that she has been tasked or would have been tasked with doing. And that is what we have to understand. So just don't look at personalities. You have to study trends. You have to look at history. You have to look at what is happening globally and how the global trends set domestic policies. We've got to be able to look at these things. And many of us can't look at these things. We're just looking at, okay, what the difference between Donald Trump and Kamala Harris would have been in terms of their personality. But it has nothing to do with personality. It's it's agenda. It is the agenda that has been set, the stage that has been set, the foundation that has been laid. And if you were watching what was happening during the Patriot Act and the signing of the Patriot Act in 2001, and how the US launched a global war on terror, not a domestic war, a global war on terror. And George W. Bush did say that it is not going to stop until all the terror cells, all the terrorists have been destroyed. Now, is that possible in the world in which we live? No. Now, who are the terrorists and these criminals that they are declaring war on? These are the questions that we need to ask. Is this war on the dissident groups, dissident voices, those who do not follow the beckoning call of the government? Or are you just thinking that they're launching a war on some criminal element? Okay? I have already said to you what is happening in Haiti is abnormal. Because when you think about the fact that they have also formed a narrative that that guy there in Haiti, what they call him, I forgot his name, the leader of the gang. Okay, I just forgot his name. But the fact of the matter is that he is suggesting that he is anti-American, anti-imperialism, anti-Western imperialism particularly, which sounds good and sounds great. And he's trying to liberate his country. He was a former police officer, Cherizer, right? Cherizer, whatever his name is, right? And he says that he's launching a war against US imperialism and trying to restore the sovereignty of his country through gangsterism. Now, when you look at the fact that Reuters and all these papers went down there to interview him, and he gave them access to himself, do you think that he is really launching a war against the United States? When we know that who controls the media in the United States, the mainstream media, the Reuters, the New York Times, the Washington Post, if he were really against the US and US imperialism, he would not have made himself, he would not have exposed himself to these people. He would not, because he knows that they could betray him. But could it be that Cherizer is also working with the US military-industrial complex and also arms of the government and also the private sector? We don't know, but it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. And many Haitians are suggesting that he's not representing them because a lot of times innocent people are the ones who are terrorized. He's not terrorizing, or these gangs are not terrorizing the business interests. The governments are not dying. The members of government are not dying. Innocent citizens. And then they're taking away our rights as we speak. Now, it is no coincidence that during Biden administration and the Kamala Harris's administration, okay, and those of you who think that Kamala Harris would have been different from Trump, and the fact that she was what she did in Haiti and all the policies that she was going to set up to be there, and that they did not deal with the gangs there, they did not solve that problem, okay, and neither do they want to solve that problem, okay, but it's no coincidence that Jamaica and Barbados, among other Caribbean countries, were called to be involved in the war on the gangs in Haiti. Because I think that Haiti now being used as a model, we were called there to copy the model so that we can also implement whatever policies need to be implemented in these individual CARICOM countries. So you are going to see some strange occurrences happening. And already they're reporting in Jamaica that since the reduction, that the Prime Minister's reduction in crime that the Prime Minister claims is under his administration and crime has been reduced, okay? Since that reduction, we're hearing that police brutality in Jamaica has increased, has doubled, has gone up over 121%. Because what we're doing now, it's that the security forces will be given the right. You know, last night I was reading an article from the Guardian newspaper, which I think perhaps I will read you some stories shortly, in which the police commissioner was suggesting, or the Prime Minister says that the state of emergency in Trinidad and Tobago will not terminate until the security force says so, until the commissioner gives her that green light to do so. Which means, therefore, the government is now putting that power into the hands of the security forces, so they can say whenever they deem it necessary for it to terminate. And that is really a sad trend, that she is going to be putting and giving that power, endowing that power into the hands of the security forces of Trinidad and Tobago, which I'm sure that is going to be the model for the other Caribbean territories. Very important that you understand that. But let us look at what Dr. Andrew Hollis continues to say in his article. It is time to launch a global war on gangs, a coordinated international effort to dismantle the vast criminal networks fueling instability across regions. From the cartels of Mexico to the gangs of Haiti, from the Ecuadorian drug syndicates to the extortionists here in Spanish Town, armed groups are increasingly resembling paramilitary organizations threatening not just citizen security, but state sovereignty. So they're going to tell us that they have to launch this war on the gangs, or rights have to be suspended because they have to break up these networks. But didn't we hear that during the war on terror, when that was launched in the United States, that rights have to be suspended temporarily so that this war can be won? And we are now 25 years into that war on terror in the United States. In fact, the US has witnessed in the last 25 years the complete erosion of their civil liberties. And you cannot blame Trump for that, because he did not lay the foundation for the Patriot Act and everything that came after it. The George W. Bushes, the Obamas, and Biden himself, and Kamala Harris, those of you who think that she would have been different from Trump. And by the way, if you're reading enough, if you're doing your reading and you're diligent at reading what is happening in the political realm, I don't have the stats right here with me, but Biden, on the Biden administration, the Biden-Kamala Harris's administration, that they also increased in terms of billions of dollars, monies into the ICE, the immigration control center there. They did it. So, and that was for border protection. They invested billions of dollars into ICE. So what Trump is doing is building on that landscape that they have left for him. What is happening is that the media now is pretending as if they don't know what is happening, they don't know of the agenda, and then make him seem like he is an anomaly. He's somebody that is not the norm. That is not where, he's different. But what happens when somebody much more dangerous than Trump, because that's what is going to happen. They're going to make him look now as he's the worst that we have ever seen. And then eventually people are going to clamor for change, and then they will send you someone that looks like a savior, but is going to end up worse than Trump. That is what is going to happen. That is what the real agenda is. And that is why you have to be careful at looking at superficial things like personality traits. You have to look at the agenda, the root cause of the problems, the economic challenges, the political challenges, the criminal challenges that we are facing at the moment. I probably should say the criminal challenge, the security challenges that we're facing at the moment. Dr. Andrew Holness continues to say that Jamaica does not manufacture firearms, yet they continue to flood our communities. Criminal networks exploit weak points in shipping channels, custom systems, and porous maritime borders to import the tools of their violent trade and turn our most vulnerable communities into battlegrounds. These criminal enterprises are not isolated. They form part of a transnational network that spans the Caribbean, Latin America, and North America. And he begins to trace data and trace data on weapons retrieved by the security forces between 2013 and 2023 revealed that 70% of the firearms came into Jamaica either directly from the US or indirectly through neighboring countries such as Haiti. The evidence shows that those sending guns from ports such as Miami are mainly members of the Caribbean diaspora with links to gangs in the region. It is these international connections that enable gangs to continually replenish their weapon stockpiles almost as rapidly as police can recover the guns from the streets. So, and we know about what happens in Haiti and all those oligarchs and their families in Miami and how they send these weapons and they have these, arms business and they send guns back and forth or send them to Haiti. And then the Haitians now, because the other Haitians are not the ones who are in charge of those armament industries. It's the oligarchs. The Haitian have oligarchs who work along with the American oligarchs to get these guns into the country. And then now they swap guns for drugs in Jamaica. And that is what is happening. And we know also that other multinational industries control the marijuana trade. So it's not the ordinary man on the streets, though they are dangerous themselves because they carry out the brutal murders that we're seeing, and they unalive many people. However, these are not the persons that we should be looking at. We should be looking at the core, the root of the problem, and we understand that these are very wealthy people who control these criminal industries. Very important that we understand these things, okay? Now, there is a article here, was another article written in the Trinidad and Guardian newspaper, and it suggests here that I think this might be the editorial from the Guardian newspaper, the Trinidad Guardian newspaper. SOE isn't a crime plan, it's a temporary fix. And this editorial is right. This editor of the Gleaner, not the editor of the Gleaner, but editor of the Trinidad Guardian is correct. It has become a troubling familiar scenario in Trinidad and Tobago, the declaration of a state of emergency in response to yet another alleged plot to destabilize the country. So that is what they're saying, that if we are going to maintain some form of stability, or if we are not going to be destabilized, then we have to have some crime fighting strategy. And right now, how we're going to solve it is through state of emergency. Prime Minister Kamala Prasad-Vizier has defended her administration's latest move, citing credible intelligence from Police Commissioner Alistair Guevara about a coordinated gang plot involving assassinations, robberies, and kidnappings. Faced with a threat, she said her government had no choice but to invoke emergency powers. Now, the same powers that when she was in opposition, she had opposed when Keith Rowling was in power. So they pretend as if they're not for this, and when they get into government, that's exactly what they do. Okay? On the surface, an SOE seems like a swift and decisive response. It grants the government, via the TNT Police Service, extraordinary authority to restrict movement, impose curfews, and detain suspects without the usual legal hurdles. But recent history tells us that while these measures may offer short-term relief, they are no substitute for a long-term solution, which that's what they're telling us. They're giving us the impression that this is long-term. And Andrew Holmes is also suggesting that crime and violence in Jamaica has been reduced. Okay? And he's not telling us that people have had to sacrifice their civil rights for that to have happened, and that he's not dealing with the root causes of criminal elements in Jamaica. In 2011, Prasad-Vizier, then heading a People's Partnership Coalition government, declared a limited state of emergency to curb escalating gang violence. Hundreds of citizens were arrested, but most were released without charge. Murders dropped briefly, only to surge again once the measures were lifted. Once the measures were lifted. And this is what we've got to understand, that as soon as they release the measures, or the measures are lifted, I'm sorry. As soon as the measures are lifted, okay, then the problem resurfaces. Okay? The results were no better, I should say, with the SOE that began on December 30, 2024, in the final days of the Keith Rowley-led government. Lasting 105 days and ending just before the 2025 general election, it too delivered a fleeting lull in violence, but failed to address the deeper causes of crime in this country: gang culture, poverty, social exclusion, weak enforcement, and a broken criminal justice system. These are the root causes of crime in Trinidad. I would think in any other country, including Jamaica: gang culture, poverty, social exclusion, weak enforcement, and a broken criminal justice system. And in Jamaica, probably we could add the lack of an education, a system that has been dysfunctional for years, for decades. What we're facing is not just a spike in violent crime, it is a consequence of a systemic failure overseen by successive administrations that have done too little to fix long-standing problems: porous borders that allow illegal firearms to flood in, decades of underinvestment in police intelligence and forensics, and a court system where fewer than 10% of murder cases end in conviction. Isn't that the same thing that happens in Jamaica? A porous borders that allow our firearms to flood Jamaica, decades of underinvestment in police intelligence and forensics, the same thing, and a court system where fewer than 10% of murder cases and ended conviction. Is the same thing, the same dynamics. States of emergency do not fix these failures. At best, they suspend them. Unless carefully managed and paired with meaningful reform, this latest SOE risks become a political smokescreen, allowing the government to appear tough on crime without committing to the institutional changes that could actually defeat it. A lasting reduction in crime will require more than joint patrols, raids, and roadblocks. It demands a comprehensive national strategy built on prevention, intervention, and enforcement. And that's a very good editorial. We're not going to solve crime and violence through the implementation of states of emergency. And that is what we're seeing now is becoming the norm in crime solving strategies. It has become the norm. And the citizens of the Caribbean are not screaming, are not sounding their alarm that this is going to be a soft lockdown. It is going to be it will result, not yet, but it will result in the complete erosion of your civil liberties and all of the liberties that you might have. Because you can be scooped up by the police, having no charge, no suspicion whatsoever, just in the wrong place at the wrong time, and you can be imprisoned. And as the papers here is suggesting in the Guardian newspaper, that oftentimes the system is so clogged, the justice system is so clogged that they will not be able to release you and to give you justice. And that is what we have to look at. We have to make sure we're understanding. Very important that we understand this. So this is what I wanted to call your attention to, that there has been a recently declared state of emergency in Trinidad and Tobago. And we must look at the fact that Dr. Andrew Holness is saying that this is going to be a global war on the gangs. And that global war is going to be equivalent to the likes of the war on terror. And the war on terror that was launched in the United States in 2001 and is ongoing has resulted in the erosion of civil liberties in the United States. The United States looks like a country at war, and in which the government has launched a war on its own citizens. So we have to be careful when we see them saying that they're launching a war on the gangs. Now, we're saying superficially, it looks good. But when we look at the system and the rottenness of the system, then we understand that this war on the criminals is not really about them. It's not a war on them. It is a war on you and your freedoms. And that is what you've got to understand. The Haitians understand it. Why can't we? If the Haitians understand it, that this phony war that you see CARICOM being engaged in with the United States and the core group, that it's a phony war, and that war is a war that's launched against and on Haitian people who are standing up for their state, and they say that they would like to be able to solve their own problems because they know that the United States and the core group only compound the problems in their country. Now, fast forward to 2025, CARICOM has been invaded, and CARICOM is being militarized. I have produced video on this channel, or videos, I should say, on this channel, in which I've spoken about the militarization of the Caribbean, and that the United States and Canada were working on doing that. And you need to go back and revisit those videos, because we are being recolonized, and all of our liberties, natural resources, and everything that whatever we have, everything that we own, our way of life, are going to be taken away from us. Are we understanding? Have we begun to develop a state of awareness and being aware of the political environment in which we are living? Many of us are not. And that is the problem. You talk to us and you realize that we speak superficially. What we see happening in government, and that's it. Oh, it's what Andrew Holness says, and there's no depth in terms of analyzing what he has said in terms of the global agenda. And if you understand the global agenda, you have to know what the UN, the World Economic Forum, the World Bank, the IMF, and all of these multilateral institutions. What is their agenda for world domination? Thank you so much for joining. I hope that you like, share, and subscribe. Like the video so the video can be shared with as many people on the platform. And for those of you who'd like to leave a financial contribution, financial donation, you can send it to my PayPal account. I will leave it in the description. Andy, ANDE, underscore Tucker, underscore 450 at hotmail.com. That's Andy, underscore ANDE, underscore Tucker, underscore 450 at hotmail.com. See you in another video. Ciao.